Hi, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, where our mantra is educate, enlighten, and entertain. Folks, I always have special guests. Every guest is special to me and phenomenal in their own way. Today is no exception, and if you are a caregiver, you are going to want to listen to my guest today. I'm so excited. My guest today is Lori Ramos Lemasters. I met her on LinkedIn. I'm so glad I did. She is a writer, an author, an educator. She's an advocate. She is founder of CarePartners Resource and Consulting and a certified Journal Self-therapeutic writing instructor. Lori conducts Journal Self workshops throughout Colorado, is involved with many things going on in Colorado that Lori can discuss. I also am so glad that Lori does what she does, and Lori is the author and writer. I love the name of this book, okay? You ready, folks? You're a caregiver, not a saint. Yay, right. That's W-R-I-T-E, right. I love the title of that book. And, before I forget, I have to do my disclaimer. The views of the guests may not represent those of the host of the station. Sometimes my brain goes ahead or my mouth goes out of my brain. So I want to welcome Lori Ramos Lemasters to Chatting with Betsy.
Hey, Betsy. Thank you so much for having me today. Really excited to talk about all the stuff we've been talking about over the last several months on LinkedIn.
Yes, you are welcome, and it is such a pleasure to have you on. I love the title of your book because it's so true. We think that we have to be, and I don't know why we think this, Lori, that we think we have to be this perfect caregiver. And folks, there's no perfect caregiver because we're not perfect. And why did you title your book that? Which I love.
Thanks. So, exactly like you said, here's the challenge for caregivers. Let's say you run into someone that you went to high school with and you haven't seen them in years, or just someone you haven't seen in a while, and they ask you, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And you say to them, oh, my spouse has dementia, and I've been, I'm not doing a lot outside of taking care of them. Or like in my case, I had to move 1,200 miles back home to take care of my mom after her surviving a massive stroke. And she was the caregiver to my dad, who was on dialysis, so I was taking care of both of them. And I would run into friends from school, and the first thing they would say when they heard I moved home to take care of my parents was, you're such a saint. Oh, my gosh, I could never do that. And so what hit me was, after years of hearing that, is that you fall into that idea that that's who you have to be, that everybody thinks you're such an amazing person and you're such a saint for taking care of someone you love, or even some caregivers are taking care of people that they don't necessarily love, but they're doing it,
True.
But when you fall into that mindset, it makes it really difficult to ask for help, to recognize, the circumstances. You don't have to be perfect. You are not a saint. You're just an average, normal person. Well, probably above average because, we are caregivers. But,
yes.
But, we're doing what was put upon us. That's what we're doing, right?
Yes. You are so right, Lori. And I tell people this on my show all the time. I went to a psychologist when that was in his mid-stage of Alzheimer's, because I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And why? Because I thought I had to be this perfect caregiver, the perfect superwoman. And that's why I love the title of your book, because we're normal people doing caregiving. And it's not easy, folks. It's rewarding, but it's not easy. And sometimes you do need help. And I recommend therapy for everybody. And I'm not ashamed to say that I went and I still go. Because after the journey, it's a whole nother situation. And I was talking to Lori before the show. Oh, and before I forget, see, my brain goes ahead of my mouth. Lori has a YouTube channel, before I forget, CarePartners Resource. Highly recommend you checking it out. It will be in the blog. Very informative, very educational. So I wanted to say that before I forgot. And just, like your book, and I just want to point out a chapter because it really touched me. And that's chapter 8, Life Goes On. Because life does go on after caregiving. And you were involved with so much. You're just amazing. You, throughout Colorado, your partnership with the Colorado Respite Coalition, which is a program of Easter sales, the Latino Age Wave, the Denver Art Museum, Denver Libraries, Colorado Area Agencies on Aging, the Alzheimer's Association, and so much more, folks. What I like to do, and you're connected with the ARP, the AARP, I highly recommend for the audience to Google my guest. Google Lori Ramos Lemasters, because I'm not doing her any justice here. She's phenomenal. Look her up. But I want to get back to your book. Why did you write this book, Lori? What motivated you?
What motivated me was my mom. This is where we have so much synchronicity, Betsy, because, after my mom survived her stroke, and I was a few years into the caregiving situation, and let me just backtrack a minute. I mean, my mom's stroke affected her speech. So she was an expressive aphasic, which means she understood everything, but could not utilize language to express herself. So she thought she was saying words when she was actually, what was coming out was do-do-do. So we would call it do-do-doing me. I'd be like, she would do-do-do a whole sentence and then look at me and expect me to do what she was asking me to do. And I was like, Mom, you just do-do-do'd me. So I don't know what you need. Let's start with, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you have to go to the bathroom? Are you tired? Now, mind you, this was all day long for 8 years while I was caring for her. She was also paralyzed on her right side, so she was a full transfer. But after, some time, you get used to the patterns and the whatever, and I understood what she was saying usually. And we would have these conversations, and finally I said to her, Mom, I want to make sure that you are not going through this struggle for nothing. People have to learn about your journey and my journey, and this has been so difficult to know the resources, to figure out where to go, who to talk to, and what to do with all the emotions that I was having. I mean, I had anger, I had ultimate huge love for my mom. She was my best friend my entire life, but I was still angry. Like, I was angry at her doctors for not pre-diagnosing the issue that happened. I just had all this stuff going on, and we both realized that we weren't alone in that, and that other people needed to learn from it. So that's what started me in my business, and that's what started me teaching my workshops and my classes, and which ultimately led to the book.
That's so awesome, because you are a perfect role model, Lori, for taking a tragedy and you turning it into triumph. You are helping others. And people may not like when I say this, and that's okay. But I feel, because of going through with my mother-in-law and with Matt, we could either be victims or we could have a victorious life. It's up to us. We get to choose. And you didn't let your caregiving for your mom and your losses, of course you're grieving. Of course we always miss our loved ones. That pain never goes away. But you're doing something. You're honoring your mom by doing the work that you're doing. And that's a beautiful thing. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly the purpose, for sure. Honoring her, making sure that, I really believe that things are put in our path for a purpose. And like you said, we can choose to follow that purpose or we can choose to ignore it. And it can strengthen our lives or ruin our lives. It's our choice.
Yes. And I'm curious as to how did writing became a instructor, a certified journal to the self-therapeutic writing instructor? So I guess that writing helped you. Did it help you during your journey? Did you write during your journey? Or was it after your journey that you decided to write or look into writing?
Actually, it was before my journey. So at the end of 2000, my ex-husband and I made a decision to get a divorce after 26 years of marriage. And I was trying to process all of that. And so I reached out to a local therapist in the Denver area who happens to be the person who started the Therapeutic Journal Writing Institute. And she uses therapeutic writing as a source of some of her therapeutic techniques in that process. So while I was in therapy, I started using the journaling. Then in 2001 is when my mother's stroke happened. But before that, in January, I lost my real father. In March, my stepfather went on dialysis. In July, my mom had her stroke. And in August, between that time, I made the choice to sell everything and move back home to California to take care of my parents. So it was a very tumultuous year, and I tried probably for about a year and a half through that entire process to just do it on my own without therapy, without the writing techniques or anything. And finally, I got to an emotional place, a very not pretty place where I needed to reach out to my therapist again. And on and off throughout that 8-year process, I would be in therapy, I would use the writing, and so on. And I did find that when I did use it, it was so helpful. And so that is why I became certified, and that is why I use it as a piece of my workshops and writing classes. Because, Betsy, the two things that caregivers don't have when they're caring for someone, the biggest two things anyway, are time and money. Mm-hmm. And a journal is pretty cheap. And most of my writing techniques take a total of about 7 minutes. So when I decided to do the book, like in the back of the book is a workbook that has techniques and prompts and all designed for caregiver situations, so that there's nothing worse than looking at a blank page and going, okay, I'm supposed to journal. What am I supposed to write about?
Right.
Yeah. So in the book, it gives you ideas, if you're struggling with accepting self-care or accepting help, there's an area in there for that. There's an area, my favorite area, honestly, is about grief. And people think that they identify grief solely with when someone dies, when you've lost that person, but caregivers suffer grief through the entire journey. There are so many losses, right? There's loss of friendship. Yeah, think about all the things, Betsy, you lost while you were caring for Matt.
Preach on, Lori. Yes. Yes.
Right?
That is so true. I talked about caregiver abandonment way before the pandemic, way before losing family, not talking to you, church members, isolation, job loss, income loss. Yep. Go ahead, go on, Lori. I'm here like going, yes.
Yes, exactly. So, I think that all of that grief and all of that loss, we don't identify. And so it's so important to recognize those losses and mourn them. Process that information so that you can move forward. Don't get stuck in the loss. And don't let that loss turn to anger. Anger just eats you up. And so there's a whole part of my book about that. Whole part of my book about just all the different things that happen to people when you're caring for a loved one. It's not just, I took so-and-so in, I took my mother-in-law in and now they live with me and life goes on as normal. Normal changes, right?
That's true. Yes, definitely. Very true. And I have to say that I looked at your book. I looked at the back of the exercises, and I'll tell you, I wished I had this book 4 years ago, even before Matt died. I wished I had a book like this. And I think the exercises in the back are just phenomenally excellent. And, folks, I'll tell you this. I kept Lori's book because I wanted it for the interview. But I know a caregiver that when I see her again, I'm going to give this book to her because I know this book is going to help her, and this book's going to help you. I just think you did a wonderful job, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And
this book.
there's people don't understand, there's techniques in here that are, when people hear the word journal, the first thing I hear is, I'm not a writer, so that doesn't apply to me. And I'm like, everybody's a writer given the right tools, right? Just like we were talking before the interview, we were talking about all of the amazing resources that are available out there for caregivers today, right? Journaling is one of those resources. It's a great way to help you to tap into your emotional self and figure out, triggers. There are so many triggers in caregiving, right?
Yes.
I'm going to give you a funny, sort of funny, not ha-ha funny, but funny story from my caregiving journey. So while I was caring for my mom, like I said, it was probably, goodness gracious, 6 years into the journey that I finally figured out what worked best for me as far as getting self-care and help into the home. And for me, that was bringing somebody in at night after my mom was already in bed. So I would do my daily stuff with her, feed her, do her exercises, the whole process. Because I wasn't comfortable. I was a control freak caregiver.
Me too.
And I wasn't, right? And I didn't think anybody could do it as well as I can, and nobody could understand her, and the list goes on and on. I mean, we're all there, right? So, but what I did do was I would put her to bed at night, and then I would have somebody come into the house and be there to make sure she was safe. And I would go in and say goodnight to her and tell her, I'm going to dinner, whatever, I'll be back. And this one particular evening, I go in, and my girlfriend and I go in to say goodbye to her. And I said, Gail came over, we're going to dinner, la, la, la. And my mom starts pointing at the clock, which she used to do to me a lot. She'd do, which I knew meant, when are you going to be home? And this particular night, it just set me off. And I'm like, Mom, I am 45 years old. You are taken care of. So-and-so is here. I'm going to dinner, and I'll be home when I get home. I'll see you later. And I left. I love you. I always said I love you before I left, but I love you, and I'll be home when I get home. And I left. So we get in the car, and my girlfriend looks at me, and she's like, whoa, that was quite an extreme reaction. Your mom just wanted to know what time you were going to be home. And so, of course, then we proceed to dinner and blah, blah, blah. Didn't have a good time because I felt guilty. There's that word, right? Guilt.
Of course, yes.
And, I came home, and I actually woke my mom up and apologized, and I was crying. I felt so bad for my reaction. But that still didn't solve things because it was like, why did I react that way? So when I journaled about it, what I realized was I turned into that 16-year-old who had to be home at 10 when all my friends got to stay out till midnight. And that was my trigger. It was like, oh, here we go again. I'm 45 years old. She's still telling me what to do. Right? But the key there was that once I understood that trigger, I was able to handle it so much differently, and we never had another circumstance like that.
That is awesome. And I was going to ask you, like, what do you tell people who are not writers, who don't like to, write? That's one of the questions I was going to ask, because I feel like I'm not a writer. But the exercises in the back of your book, what I like about it, because I am not a writer, you are giving what instructions, what to do.
Exactly.
And that I like. So it's not like I'm just have to say, okay, I feel like grieving. But you have a section, an exercise on that. And that's what I like about your book, because it isn't just doing a blanket journal. You're giving guidelines to help people think and create a dialogue within themselves. And I just think that it's genius. You must be a genius.
No, and people don't recognize all the different types of journaling there are, right? So there's, there's unsent letters, or a perspective, like if you're really, say, angry with someone, a family member who's not stepping up where you feel they should be stepping up, and you want to have a conversation with them, but you're not quite sure how to, you don't want it to blow up, or, you have all this raw emotion and you're afraid to open your mouth because, as soon as you start talking, you try to start the conversation constructively, and then before you know it, you're just like, you don't do this and you don't do that, blah, blah, blah. So there are a couple of 2 or 3 different types of journaling techniques that allow you to go through that process ahead of time so that you get the emotion out, which helps you then have a more constructive conversation when you actually have the conversation. There's a perspective, right? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Betsy.
Oh, no, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
And then, there's a perspective, right, which I love to use in my classes for people who don't want to accept assistance from people or won't practice self-care out of guilt or whatever circumstances are. And a perspective's right is you go into the future and you write as if you've already done it, and you get to see how it feels. Once you see that it went okay and you were able to do it, I always tell caregivers, the biggest question you have to ask yourself when you're leaving your loved ones is, are they safe? Because nobody's going to do it like you do it. No, right? It just is. But you can't do it all the time, 24/7 for however many years your caregiving journey is going to go on. So you have to let go a little bit. And as long as your loved one is safe, then that's what's most important.
Yes, yes. And I say this, or I know I sound redundant, Lori, but I will keep saying it, is that self-care is a matter, literally, of a caregiver's life, quality of life, really a matter of life and death. And people might tell Betsy, you're so over dramatic with saying that, and I'm not, and I'll tell you why, folks, because caregiving is highly stressful. What does stress do to your body? Think about it. We get diseases, we get illnesses from stress. It does a number in our bodies, and if we don't take care of ourselves and chill out, relax, recharge our batteries, we're not going to have a healthy life. That's just a fact. Which is why I know it's so difficult, especially near the end of life. I felt guilty getting my hair done when Matt was in hospice, but I figured, I had this appointment before he went up there to the unit, and I said, I'm going to visit him later. But then you second guess yourself. Well, I could have been there a couple hours more. But you need to recharge. We all need to recharge our batteries. And if the mortality rate of caregivers is very high, and it's because
30% and 40%.
Yes, that's high. And how many caregivers, Lori, have you met that have had problems after caregiving because they didn't take care of themselves?
Yes, health issues. Yeah, for sure. And the other thing to recognize is one of the first classes I teach is to identify what you need for self-care, because a lot of times as caregivers we're told we need to go away for 3 hours, or we need 24 hours away, or we need 8 hours away, or, go get your nails done, or go get your hair done, or go to the movies, or whatever. And if that isn't something you enjoy, then you're going to say, well, I don't need self-care because, I don't like those things. But what do you need? So once you identify what is self-care to you, maybe for you it's 10 minutes away, step outside for 10 minutes and breathe. Maybe for you it's bringing someone into the house to help care for your loved one while you just sit outside and read a chapter in a book. Or while you relate to your loved one, like for me, I would have definitely benefited from being able to just sit and be my mom's daughter again instead of her caregiver all the time. So It's so important to identify that and then do it, and start with baby steps. If you are not comfortable leaving your loved one for 4 hours, try an hour and then go up from there.
That's a good suggestion.
Thanks.
Yes, and you know what, Lori, like people think, self-care, it's not necessarily going to the spa. I think we need to take care of our souls and to feed our soul. Like, what do you like to do? For me, I love John Denver music, and self-care was sitting in the bathtub listening to John Denver, pretending I was in the mountains. That was self-care. I couldn't always go out. I couldn't spend a day away. I was lucky if I could do a couple of hours, but we have to take care of our inner souls. Meditate, if that's your thing. Pray, if you could go to a church service, whatever religion you are. Your faith. Just taking care of that part of you is so important. Lori, do you do classes virtual about with your writing? Oh, you do?
I do. I do a free class every month. I'm actually sponsored by Colorado Respite Coalition, which is a part of Easter Seals, and they are for anybody, anywhere in the country. They are free. They're a 90-minute Zoom class. And again, if you can only make 30 minutes, if you have to pop in late, if you have to pop off early, it's designed for a caregiver's lifestyle. I completely, having been one for so many years, I completely understand that things come up. But, they are free Zoom sessions, and we talk about self-care, we talk about resources, and there's always 2 or 3 different journaling techniques and processes that we go through during the workshop. And then there's also a lot of caregiver discussion and sharing. And I think it's so important for caregivers to help other caregivers. We learn so much from our own walk, right? You know, it doesn't always have to be experts telling us.
True. Because that's so true, Lori, because I'd rather hear someone who walked through it than someone who's just talking about it through something that they have read or learned in a seminar. But someone who's lived it, it's totally different. And you do get to me, I get a different vibe. I love that. How does someone register for your class?
Sure. So I have a list of classes on my website, which is CarePartners Resource.com. That's CarePartners with an S, Resource.com. And there's a list of classes on there, and there's a link to register. Or you can email me. And also, if you're listening to this and you have questions about journaling, or you have, anything you want to reach out to me about, my email address is Lori, Lori, at carepartnersresource.com.
And that will be in the blog, folks. That is very, very cool. I love that. I love your passion, Lori. And see, this is my own opinion, folks, okay? When someone was a caregiver, like Lori, like myself, you could tell a passion in their voice, different from someone who's just book learned and was taught something at a seminar. You can hear the difference. I feel the difference, to be honest with you. And I would rather, this is my own opinion, but I would rather go to a seminar with someone who is conducting it, like Lori, who's walked the walk. They know what they're talking about. They've experienced it. They know. And I tell you what, I wished I knew about this, or maybe it wasn't around a few years ago, but this is a class I could have benefited from. And Lori, one of the reasons why I do this show is to provide people with resources, people like you who are helping others, and people can benefit, because we all think we're alone in how we feel. We're not. And when people know about resources that can help them have a better life and help them be a better caregiver, which then gives their loved one a better quality of life. And it's just phenomenal. I just love what I do, because I love meeting people like you, Lori, who are on fire to help people. And I just enjoyed chatting with you. You have so much to offer. If I was listening to this show and I was a caregiver, and even if I wasn't a caregiver, because I'll tell you, folks, if you're not already, you probably will be. Okay? Baby boom generation, I'm one. I'm going to need a caregiver probably. I've been a caregiver. I'm still a caregiver. So, you can always benefit from a class like Lori's, even if you're not a caregiver. Isn't that right, Lori? I mean, I think anyone could benefit from attending your class.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And using therapeutic writing, anybody can benefit from it. It is definitely a wonderful self-care technique for everyone and anyone. And honestly, there are some experts that would disagree with me, but I think if you are a wife, if you are a mother, if you are, I shouldn't even say wife, if you're a spouse, if you're a parent, if you have parents who are aging, you're a caregiver, whether they are ill or not ill. There's the worry, there's assisting with financial decisions, or just anything. There's an element of caregiving in all of that, and I think we can all learn from it. And again, so the book is available on my website, but it's also available on Amazon. So if you think of anyone that whether you can use it or you want to share, your listeners want to share it with people that they know that can use it. And last, I also want to mention my Facebook page, because it's CarePartners Resource and Consulting. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I do put free prompts and writing techniques on there pretty regularly. And I also market the class on there, so you can just click the link from there as well.
Oh, okay, and that's on Facebook.
Yep.
Oh, great. I was going to ask you beat me to it, where people can purchase your book. So thank you, either the website or Amazon.com. And people can get that international, Lori,
yes.
Your book?
I believe so.
That's awesome. Lori, thank you for coming on. You heard Lori Ramos Lemasters today, author, writer of You're a Caregiver and Not a Saint. Yay, right? That's WRITE. I just love talking to you, Lori. Thank you for what you do in helping caregivers and being a role model for making your life a powerful one. And you're still, you're an advocate, and you're out there. And, folks, I can speak from my own experience. We use a lot of people who are advocates. We use our pain and our experience to help others. So you could avoid the mistakes that we made and learn from us. But I think that I could have definitely benefited from Lori's class. I could have benefited from the book, the journaling, and this is why I do my show. This is why I love to provide people with resources. It's a passion of mine because I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to feel alone and not have help. And here is help. Here is a great place where you can get help. And I'll tell you what, if I was a caregiver, I would jump right on your website. As soon as I finished hearing the show, I would jump on the website, because when and this is the truth, I joined Facebook in 2014. I was hungry for knowledge. I was hungry for support. I didn't have any for 14 years between my mother-in-law, my dad, and Matt. And I went crazy joining support groups. And it was so helpful to know, hey, I'm not alone. There's people who feel the same way. They're going through the same thing. And I learned from other caregivers, Lori. I learned a lot. So I want to encourage caregivers, share your story, share your experience of somebody else.
Support each other,
Yes, definitely. I believe in supporting each other. And speaking of support groups, before I forget, if anyone's looking for one, I have one on Facebook, #Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. You don't have to have Alzheimer's. It's for caregivers. You don't have to be a caregiver, but if you want to get educated, I believe, Lori, you're a member of my group.
Yep.
And, a lot of educational links. And we welcome all walks of life. Alzheimer's or any dementia doesn't discriminate, and neither do I. And I want to encourage you all to read the blog, because Lori's information will be in the blog. I want to thank Jeannie White, the station manager, Passionate World Talk Radio, who does the blog and produces the show. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And I want to thank you for listening, the listeners, for listening, subscribing. Please tell your friends about Chatting with Betsy. I want to get the word out there. I want people to know there's help. I want people to know there's resources, and that's what my show provides. And I think even if it's not specifically, if I have a show that's not specifically about caregiving, anyone can benefit from any of my guests. Anyone can benefit from it. You don't have to be a caregiver. And it struck me the other day when I was hearing someone doing a TED Talk, and they're going to be a guest on my show. They talk about, this is kind of funny, 65 and older population, and I had to laugh. I said, that's me now.
That's me.
I said, that's me. I'm in a 60, well, I'm just turned 65, but that's me. That was a stark reality. Hey, I'm in that aging population. I don't think of myself that way, but yes, I am. And,
right.
It's a sobering thought. So I was like, that is now me. So life is short, folks. Enjoy it. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because if we were all kind and shined our light, it would be a much brighter, peaceful, happier world. And that's what I always say at the end of my show, because that's what I believe in. And Lori, you're shining your light, and I'm so thankful that you are, and thankful for what you do and for being a guest again. Thank you so much. That's it for today, folks. You're welcome. That's it for today, folks. Till we chat again, this is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Bye-bye now.